Hey, what's up everybody? Let's talk more about the protests. If you didn't watch my last video about the God who riots, I suggest you check that out. The link is in the description. But today I want to talk about so many Christians that I've seen respond to these protests by posting pictures and videos of black people hugging cops. And they're talking about how we need to love cops. We need to embrace them, and that's what's going to solve this. And it makes sense. It very much seems like, yeah, that would be the Christian thing to do, right? To respond with love, to talk about forgiveness and reconciliation and coming together. I get it. That makes sense. I'm a Christian too. I straight up have a tattoo that says love wins. I very much believe that. However, in this case, I very much believe that the Christian response, the loving response, is not to be posting those pictures, but to actually be listening to people talking about police brutality and to actually join in these protests against police brutality. If you're a Christian watching this and you posted stuff like that, let me tell you, a lot of people see those photos that you posted and they think, wow, yet again, Christians ignoring the pain of hurting people. You probably don't believe me, but trust me, that's exactly how it looks. Think about it. So many people have been struggling for years and years to listen to them talk about police brutality and centuries to listen to them talk about racism. And you respond by saying, think about the police. Hey, we just need to love the police right now. You got to get what I'm saying here. If you had a friend come to you and confide to you about the abuse they were facing from someone, you would not respond if you were a good friend by saying, well, think about how they feel. And you definitely wouldn't go into this whole, well, not all people are like that, okay? No. You would listen to them and you would help them. And another huge reason that we don't like seeing a bunch of photos of hugging cops, and especially cops kneeling with protesters, is that in several of these cases, those same cops a day later, or and several times an hour later, proceeded to shoot rubber bullets and tear gas those same protesters. But this response from certain Christians about how we need to love the cops right now comes from something way deeper than anything I've seen anyone talk about in this conversation. So I want to talk about two major reasons that I believe several Christians are talking about how we need to hug and love the cops right now in the middle of these protests against police brutality, during which more police brutality is happening. First of all, as several people who grew up in conservative Christian environments are aware, there are a lot of abuse scandals in these environments. Not all the time, but enough to have an impact on the culture. And perhaps an even bigger impact on the culture than the abuse itself is the way that the church responds to abuse that happens. And churches tend to be really bad when it comes to responding to abuse. And it is partly because our society as a whole is really bad at that. We don't know how to properly respond to so many abuse victims and how to help them overcome their trauma properly and how to stop abuse from happening even further. But what makes certain churches especially bad at it is that their horrible responses to abuse is mixed in with toxic understandings of concepts like forgiveness, restoration, and reconciliation. There are a lot of cases in churches where abuse is swept under the rug because the abuser repented. And then the victim is forced to stay in community with their abuser. And if they refuse to do so, then they're accused of being sinfully unforgiving. I'm not going to give a bunch of examples of this kind of thing because I feel like it would be a waste of time, but I did leave some articles in the description that go even deeper into this common phenomenon and gives plenty of examples. But I feel like most of the people who watch my videos are very aware that this kind of stuff happens. Most people who grew up in conservative church environments are aware of this. The truth is, if you spent a significant amount of time in conservative churches, then you are aware of one or two cases where an abuser should have gotten in significant legal trouble, but they didn't because the victim didn't press charges and nothing happened. Maybe they went to another church, but nothing else happened. You know what I'm talking about, people. And here's what's wrong with all that. The teaching of forgiveness and restoration and reconciliation has been perverted in these cases. Forgiveness, reconciliation, and restoration are all important conversations to have and important processes to go through in order to help the victim overcome their trauma and to stop further abuse from happening. Instead, we see it used to protect the abuser and to further shame the victim. Also, victims should never be required to personally reconcile with their abuser. They should have the freedom to never see their abuser again. And still forgive, because forgiveness is a commitment to be personally free of personal resentment. So this culture of shaming victims into embracing their abusers is such a norm in conservative churches. And in several churches, there's a much softer version of it, but it's still present. And then you put the Black Lives Matter protests in front of people who are in this environment, and through their environmental lens, they see a bunch of people who refuse to forgive the bad cops and are now taking it out on all cops. And what really needs to happen is reconciliation. And that's why they're sharing photos and videos of black people hugging cops. And also several of them hear stories of cops killing and abusing people, and they respond by saying, well, what was the person doing to make the cop do that? Because they come from a culture where the victim is called to question before the abuser. An old friend of mine used to go to a church where he told the staff about the pastor treating people inappropriately, and they responded by shaming him and telling him to never question the pastor. This kind of stuff happens all the time. And I'm not saying all conservative Christians are like this. I'm saying that this culture is such the norm in conservative churches that so many Christians don't realize that this is how they're functioning. They don't realize that their minds have been messed with when it comes to this issue. Now, restoration of individual cops and reconciliation can happen, but should only happen after they have quit their position where they are required to enact state violence on the most vulnerable people of our society. And this isn't the police abolition video, so I'll leave that at that. Now, the second major reason I believe we're seeing so many Christians quick to defend cops is because of how Christianity came to this country. Let me remind you that Christianity started as a radical anti-empire movement of Jesus followers who claimed Jesus was the savior of the world, bringing peace and prosperity through sacrificial love and justice, instead of the popular narrative of the time that said Caesar was the savior of the world, bringing peace and prosperity through global military violence. And so Jesus and most of the early apostles were put on crosses because crucifixion was a punishment for the crime of sedition, executed publicly for people to see so that they know not to stand up to the governing powers the way that these people did. Throughout the centuries, Christianity was co-opted by colonizers as a tool to colonize. So as we know, this country and all of Latin America was colonized by British Anglicans and Spanish Catholics, and they used Christian symbols and scriptures to subordinate Black and Indigenous and later Latinx people, telling them that they must obey the white man who looks a lot like this white Jesus and this white Virgin Mary. As centuries passed, colonized people actually read the Bible and engaged with these Christian symbols and realized that the God of the Bible that was used to colonize them was actually on their side. And they were empowered by the Christian faith to struggle for their freedom from the colonizers. So when it comes to the way we talk about Christianity in America today, the theological developments that were developed to justify colonization and the theological developments that were developed to justify the colonized struggling for their freedom are all mixed in together. And it's difficult to sift through it all. The way that it's difficult to sift through the differences in all the ingredients of a cake after you're already eating it. However, sometimes it's pretty dang easy to figure out which stream a certain Christian idea comes from. And I'll tell you, the Christian idea that rebukes people for disrespecting and defying their authorities when they oppress them seems to pretty obviously come from the stream of the Christianity of the colonizers. So if you've spent the last couple of weeks criticizing the protesters more than you've been criticizing police brutality, and you think it's coming from your Christian faith, I want you to really dig deep in your Christian faith and think about the ways that you've been manipulated. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. Our minds have been messed with. And it's not necessarily the fault of the Christian leaders in your life. This has taken place over a long period of time. People teaching others, and those people teaching others, and those people teaching others. So many people who are communicating awful ideas don't know that they're communicating awful ideas. But if you're a serious Christian, you should very much take seriously the journey of deconstructing that which was handed down to you in order to discover the truth. Because the truth will set you free, right? So during this time, I implore you to do some exploration and search for the truth. Thank you for watching this video. You can subscribe to watch more videos like this, and you can also follow me on Twitch, where we talk about this kind of stuff in a more free-form and interactive way. And you could join the Discord filled with people talking about this kind of stuff. The link is in the description. And if you'd like to support me, I'd really appreciate it. It would help a lot. You can support me at patreon.com/Damon Garcia. Shout out to my patrons already over there. Balaj Vin Seidel, Stephen Harp, Janjin Sulipona, Alex Albatross, Angela Mamel, The Kami Christian, David, James Finlay, Julianne King, Keegan James, Kristen Mouse, Marina Black, Mimi McGann, New Transcendentalist, Onion, Peter A., Peter John Blake, Refined Your Scene, Samuel Sakwe, and everyone else. I appreciate the support. Stay safe out there, everybody. See you later.